Okay, one of the major storylines going into the 2023-2024 season is the rise of Luke Hughes. We already seen what he could do in a limited amount of NHL games, but what can he do in a full 82-game season? Could he possibly win the Calder Trophy and upset Connor Bedard? We have a lot to talk about in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Let's talk about Luke Hughes and the excitement surrounding his game going into the new season. Now, this is an episode that I've been sitting on for quite a while, but since I received a recent ranking of 22 and under players in the NHL courtesy of Locked On, I felt as though now is the time to do this sort of episode because I want to share my thoughts in regard to Luke Hughes and the possibility of him winning the Calder Trophy. So to begin today's episode, I'll give you guys some backstory, some stats, and my overall perspective of watching Luke's game the last few weeks of the season. And then in the second segment, I'll talk about my expectations for him going into the 2023-2024 season. And then to round it all off, I'm going to compare him to Connor Bedard, who is obviously the front runner to win the Calder, but I'm going to make a case as to why Luke might dethrone him because Luke has the second best odds of winning the Calder according to FanDuel. So let's start with the backstory for Luke Hughes. Now, I think it's safe to say he's had himself quite the journey the last year or so, and he'll tell you he's done world championships, he's done world juniors, he's competed in 2 Frozen Fours, he had to play in a few NHL games to close out the year, then he was put onto the big stage competing in the Stanley Cup playoffs in round 2 against the Carolina Hurricanes. So it's been quite the journey for Luke Hughes, but if I had to use one word to describe his overall game, it would be comfortable because despite him having that thick of a schedule and basically just having to adjust on the fly, play with a bunch of different teams throughout his young career, he's looked rather comfortable and his game hasn't really taken that big of a hit. If anything, it continues to get better. So what I saw from Luke Hughes when he made his NHL debut against the Buffalo Sabres, it was nothing impressive. He had one takeaway and one hit, but then come the next game against the Washington Capitals, he arguably had one of the biggest goals of the season for the New Jersey Devils, in which he was able to get the game-winning goal in overtime, which solidified the Devils reaching 52 wins, thus breaking a franchise record for most wins in a single season. And once again, it was electrifying. It was exciting. The Devils were trailing for a good chunk of the game. That was the game in which Akira Schmid was also able to solidify himself a roster spot come playoff time and basically take the spot of Mackenzie Blackwood. So there were a bunch of storylines for that Washington Capitals game, and Luke Hughes played a big factor in it. And then come round 2 against the Hurricanes, once again, he has to replace an injured Ryan Graves, and he looked really solid on both sides of the ice. Like, he was playing good defense, he was playing good offense, obviously, and he just looked rather comfortable out there. And I think he only made really one true mistake, and that was getting too fancy with a pass attempt, resulted in the Hurricanes going down the other side of the ring, trying to get the shorthanded goal. And then I think Dougie Hamilton, unfortunately, had a stick infraction that resulted in a penalty shot. Questionable move, but I'm trying to remember from the top of my head, so bear with me. But like I said, the point was that was really the only mistake that I saw from Luke Hughes on my end. Now, obviously, his amount of games at the NHL level was minuscule, but here's an interesting fact for you guys. So he appeared in 2 regular season games and 3 playoff games, which was a total of 5 games. And in those 5-game span, he had 1 goal, 3 assists for a grand total of 4 points. So meaning that Luke Hughes was on pace to be a point-per-game player because, once again, 4 points in 5 game appearances. That is amazing. Another thing that I want to bring into the light is that Luke had 35 shifts and spent 25 minutes on the ice in game 5 in the elimination game. So that was really impressive to see. I said, no matter what happened to the Devils after game 5, he and John Marino needed to take a bow because they really stepped up their game in more ways than one. So Luke just went above the call of duty in game 5 for the Devils, and it's going to get forgotten about because people are going to remember it as the elimination game. And if that's just a sample size of what's to come for Luke and his overall development, I'm really excited to see what he could do for an 82 game season. And like we're going to discuss in the third and final segment, I think he could definitely give Connor Bedard a run for his money. Now, I had the chance to speak with Luke Hughes months back during exit interviews, and I asked him, like, how did he settle in so quickly to the NHL? Because obviously, like I said, he had a very busy schedule competing internationally, competing at the collegiate level. Now he has to get adjusted to the NHL game speed, and he was put into some peculiar situations that I'm sure he didn't foresee himself being put into. But here's what he told me a good while back.
How were you able to settle in so quickly into the NHL? Because you said it yourself, you went from going to the Frozen Four to now playing a lot of minutes in Game 5 in an elimination game. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like just the process of just settling down in the NHL and getting comfortable.
Yeah, I think I was very prepared, coming in with my mindset and, how my game was ready after going 2 years at Michigan. So I think the second year for me was huge, just developing my skills and making sure my body was ready, making sure my strength was up, and then just a maturity level just to make sure my mind was ready for the NHL and the ups and downs and how even keel you have to be.
Once again, the word that I would use to describe Hughes and his overall development up to this point is that he just looked rather comfortable out there, and it didn't matter if he was competing internationally at the collegiate level or the NHL level. He really knew how to take his game to new heights, surprise a lot of people. He surprised me, especially defensively. And as we all know, he was selected 4th overall by the Devils back in 2021. So he's really panning out into that top-notch selection. And I think Tom Fitzgerald and company, they're really excited to see what Luke Hughes can do because now the Devils are contending. They're trying to make an even further push in the playoffs. And the fact that Luke Hughes looked rather comfortable on a top-notch caliber team, I think it really says something about his overall game. And also, it intrigues me. If the Devils were rebuilding and if he was one of the go-to guys, I wonder what his stats would look like. Or once again, I just got to see what he does for an 82-game season. But we've been talking about how a lot of the young players, especially like Alexander Holtz, they're sort of the victims of the Devils' success because they can never get into a groove. They can never really settle in all that well. But that's not the case for Luke Hughes. He's really different. He's of a different breed, and it's showing in more ways than one. So we're going to talk more about Luke Hughes and the expectations I have for him going into the new year. But before we continue, I want to tell you guys about AG1. It's literally a product that I use every day. So AG1, the daily foundational nutrient supplement that supports whole body health. I drink it all the time. Like I just said, before a workout, I gave AG1 a try because I wanted to be happier. I want to be healthier. My body's a temple. Got to start treating it as such. So I drink AG1 in the morning before I record an episode, during a long car ride, wherever the case might be. I love it, and you will too. So AG1 is the foundational nutrient supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. AG1 replaces your motivation, probiotics, and more in one simple drinkable habit. Science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food source nutrients, AG1 is raising the standard for quality in the supplement category. AG1 helps you build your health foundation first. So if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out. Okay, before I talk about my personal expectations for Luke going into the new year, here's what he had to tell us a few months back in regard to expectations that he has for himself. Check it out.
What are your expectations come next year? Because you just mentioned that you expect to be with the team full time. Has there been talk about a bigger role, or has there been a discussion of that sorts yet?
No, I mean, we just finished our season. I need to have a big summer, and I think everyone knows that, and come back and win a role, and really step in and try to help these guys out.
So here's the thing that I'm expecting from Luke Hughes. I'm expecting for him to have a much bigger role, because similar to what I alluded to in the first segment, when the Devils were in round 2 of the playoffs against the Carolina Hurricanes, they were in desperate need of a spark plug, and Ryan Graves goes down with an injury. And I was a little hesitant, but I was like, okay, desperate times call for desperate measures, because the Devils, they were down 2-0. They needed something to just shake up their offensive game plan or just get something a little bit more exciting. So insert Luke Hughes. And the rest of the way during the second round, he really impressed once again. And he outplayed Ryan Graves, which is why I think it was easy for Tom Fitzgerald to move on from Ryan Graves and just say, you know what, on the left-handed defensive side, we're going to take the chance on Luke Hughes. We're going to let him just play a full 82-game season. Graves did wonderful for the Devils the last couple seasons, but it's now time for Luke Hughes to shine in the spotlight and be given that bigger role. So that's one of the expectations that I have for Luke going into the new year, which is just having a bigger role. And the word that I used to describe him once again in the first segment was comfortability. And I think he's going to be a lot more comfortable if he wasn't already. So I think once he knows that he's going to be given that bigger role, he plays in more games, he goes through the trials and tribulations of a full 82-game season, I think he's definitely going to look a lot more comfortable out there. But one of the key X factors is going to have to be, how does he fare come January or February? Because obviously his body is going to take a toll on him at one point or another. Not everyone can be like Dawson Mercer and basically be like this young Iron Man and play in all 82 games for 2 straight seasons and not deal with injury or fatigue, or maybe just being a healthy scratch, whatever the case might be. So Luke Hughes, that's my X factor for him, which is when you play that 82-game season, how are you going to fare come January or come February? Now, the thing is that the Devils were doing their best to make sure that Luke does get that rest and recovery, which is why he was not at development camp over the summer, because like I said in segment 1, he had a busy schedule internationally, collegiate-wise, and also competing on a full scale at the NHL level, especially during the playoffs. So the point of that was just to give his body a rest so he can refocus, recover, and get ready for the start of the new season, which is fast approaching. So I think another thing that we need to take into consideration is that he's going to be a prominent asset for the Devils' blue line, because Ryan Graves and Damon Severson, they provided a lot of the scoring for the Devils' blue line. Now, obviously, Dougie Hamilton is at the helm of it. And I talked about Dougie Hamilton in a recent episode in which I said, I know that Hamilton is definitely going to lead the charge offensively when it comes to defensemen for the Devils, but who's going to be that second option? Because it can't just be the Dougie Hamilton show. Now that Damon Severson and Ryan Graves are both gone, who's going to generate that offense on the blue line? It's going to have to be Luke Hughes. So the fact that he's going to have a prominent role and he's going to play to his strengths, I think that's another key asset that we can look at. Now, according to Daily Faceoff, they are projecting for Luke Hughes to participate on the second power play unit for the Devils. So he would join the likes of Tyler Toffoli, Dawson Mercer, Andre Palat, and possibly Alexander Holtz, but that's a debate for another time. I think Luke can definitely play a huge role on the power play for the Devils, because if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times during this offseason. The Devils are way too talented to be a mediocre power play team. Now that Timo Meier is going to be given a chance to participate in a full 82-game season in a Devils sweater, Tyler Toffoli the same way, now Luke Hughes, I think those players can be huge X factors as to why the Devils can take their power play to the next level. So when it comes to even strength, when it comes to man advantages, I think Luke is definitely going to have a big role, especially on the defensive side of things, because John Marino, he's not going to generate the offense. Jonas Siegenthaler, he's not going to generate the offense. Kevin Bull, he's not going to generate the offense. Colin Miller, he could generate the offense, but not as consistently. So it's going to have to be Dougie Hamilton and Luke Hughes leading the way in that sort of category when it comes to offensive execution on the blue line for the Devils. And here's something else that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. So we all know that Luke only played in a few regular season games and a few playoff games, meaning that this upcoming season is going to be his official rookie year in the NHL. I don't think a lot of people know the importance of him playing in those few games just to get his feet wet and see like, okay, what do I need to work on? What's going right for me? And how will this fare in a full 82 game season? That is so essential for his development. And I'm glad he was able to just get a little bit of that, because I think back to a recent example in Matty Beniers for the Seattle Kraken. Obviously, the Kraken in their inaugural season, they missed the playoffs by a good margin, and they brought up Matty Beniers. He signed his entry-level contract shortly after the season had concluded for the Michigan Wolverines, and he was able to get his feet wet at the NHL level. And then come year two, I guess you could call it, of him now being on an NHL roster for a full 82-game season, Matty won the Calder Trophy, and he was one of the reasons why the Seattle Kraken were able to make it to the playoffs and have a pretty decent run. And I guess a lot of people could call it their Cinderella run, because I don't think a lot of people were picking the Seattle Kraken to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. But Matty Beniers, he excited a lot of people. And also, coincidentally, Matty Beniers and Luke Hughes are former teammates at the University of Michigan. So that's something to take note of. Also, if you recall to something I said in segment 1, Luke had 4 points in 5 game appearances. So coincidentally, Matty Beniers also had that sort of same trajectory in which he was close to being a point per game player, because in the Kraken's inaugural season, Matty appeared in 10 games and he had 9 points. So another coincidence for you. Now, Amanda Stein asked Luke this question a few months back about the importance of playing those NHL games, and he provided his perspective in regard to how that helps his development. Here's what he had to say.
How important for you was it to get a little bit of a taste of that NHL, whether it's regular season, playoffs, going into this season?
Yeah, I think it was, really important for me, just to see where my game is at and, have those building blocks to go off of. So, I think playing a team like Carolina too, one of the best teams in the NHL defensively, and really seeing what I can do against them was important for me, and I think important for the people in the organization to see.
Once again, that is so essential for his development, and if he really needs some inspiration, just look no further than his Wolverine teammate in Matty Beniers, because once again, Beniers plays in a few games during the inaugural season for the Kraken. He was able to get his feet wet, and then come year 2 of him being in the NHL, now officially being marked as a rookie, he wins the Calder Trophy, and Seattle Kraken, they go on a Cinderella type season in their sophomore year in the league, and they make it to the playoffs, and they actually have a pretty decent run. So if Luke Hughes needed any inspiration, if like he needed it, like I think he's very inspired, but still, if he just needed any sort of just hope or whatever the case might be, then he should really just look over his shoulder and look at his former Wolverine teammate, Matty Beniers. Okay, so a few weeks ago, Locked On sent a lot of the Locked On NHL hosts some ranking polls and just said, like, here's a list of players, rank them 1 through 20, like who is the best mascot in the NHL, who's the top forward, who's the top defenseman, who's the top goalie, and obviously I have a vote in that. So one of the categories that we voted on was who were the top NHL players 22 and under, and the top 5 results were Jack Hughes, which was to be expected. Jack Hughes is the truth, and once again, he was at the helm as to why the Devils were able to have such a historic season, and Hughes is on the perfect trajectory to being a superstar in this league and possibly getting his name even more into the Hart Trophy race. Discussion for another time. And then coming at second was Tim Stützle. Okay, debatable, but I can live with that. Third was Connor Bedard, and behind him was Matty Beniers and Trevor Zegras. Okay, I got to go a bit on a rant here. And listen, I'm not trying to say that Connor Bedard is going to be a bust, so please nobody take this out of context. But what are we doing here? Connor Bedard hasn't played in an NHL game, yet, let alone a preseason game. And yet he's ahead of Matty Beniers and Trevor Zegras for the best 22 and under players. I just said in segment 2 that Matty Beniers was one of the reasons why the Seattle Kraken went to the playoffs and made a pretty good run. Trevor Zegras, I know the Anaheim Ducks aren't all that good, but still, every time SportsCenter posts about hockey, the little that they do, it's usually Trevor Zegras in those highlight reels. So why is Connor Bedard ahead of Matty Beniers and Trevor Zegras in that sort of aspect? Normally, I don't release my rankings in terms of non-Devil players, but in this case, I'll tell you guys where I ranked Connor Bedard. We were given 20 players, like I said, and we had to rank them 1 through 20, and the top 5 were going to get posted. I put Connor Bedard at number 20, not because I think he's going to be a bad player, not in that sort of aspect, and I'm not saying he's going to be a bust either, but the fact is that he has not played in an NHL game yet, let alone a preseason game. So I'm not going to put Connor Bedard in my top 5 because I don't have anything to base it off of, at least for the NHL level. Connor Bedard is a great skill to have, and I'm excited to see what he could do for the Chicago Blackhawks, and hopefully he is that centerpiece that can help them with their overall rebuild. But I am not going to say that Connor Bedard is ahead in terms of skill-wise or talent-wise or stats-wise in front of Matty Beniers, Trevor Zegras, who have already established themselves as very formidable players at the NHL level. That does not make sense. And once again, I'm not saying he's a bust. I'm just saying I'm not going to rank him in the top 5 simply because he hasn't played in an NHL game yet. So that's my little bit of a rant, and that's my little bit of a tangent. But once again, I think Connor Bedard is going to be a good player. Obviously, he has the capability of doing so, but let's not put too much pressure on the kid. Now, like I said in segment 1, if you were to look at the FanDuel Sportsbook odds and see who's the front runner for the Calder Trophy, Connor Bedard has the best odds at minus 120. And Luke Hughes has the second best odds at plus 600. So if you need some reference, if you were to put down a $5 wager for Luke to win the Calder, you could potentially win $30. Now, I'm going to make a case as to why Luke Hughes could possibly upset Connor Bedard and win the Calder Trophy. So reason number 1, he actually has NHL experience. So once again, he had probably one of the biggest goals for the Devils this past season to close out the season. OT game-winning goal that solidified 52 wins, that broke the franchise record. Then come playoff time, the Devils were in desperation mode. They needed a shakeup, and Luke Hughes played a huge factor in that. And we saw him and his brother Jack take over in Game 3 to try to keep the Devils' playoff hopes alive. He outplayed Ryan Graves. He basically was one of the reasons why Ryan Graves was forced out of New Jersey and Graves was forced to sign somewhere else once free agency began. So he has the NHL experience. He did really well. 5 NHL appearances, both regular season and playoffs, and he had 4 points. And that should just be a small snippet of what he's capable of doing. Okay, second reason, he's going to be given a bigger role, similar to what I said in segment 2. The offense is going to have to come from someone else other than Dougie Hamilton in terms of defensemen. And like I said, once again, I think that's going to be Luke Hughes. He's going to be the go-to guy in that regard. And I am perfectly comfortable with Luke Hughes playing in power play situations. I am more than certain that Lindy Ruff is going to utilize him more on the power play this upcoming season. And reason number 3, he worked out his kinks. He worked out his issues. So one of the problems that Luke Hughes had when he was first drafted, according to some scouting reports, was that he was great offensively. There was no ands, ifs, or buts about it. But his defense was a huge question mark because people were saying he gets a little too jumpy on the defensive side of things. It puts him out of position, and he gets exposed in that sort of aspect. But what did I say in segment 1? I said Luke really did well on both ends of the rink. He played well defensively. He played well offensively. Literally, I think I can only name one major mistake he made, and that was in Game 3, but he still had a really good game. So I think for Luke, the fact that he was able to just work out some of those minor issues and really step up defensively and still join in on the rush for the Devils in some offensive scenarios, I think a lot of people should be excited. The fact that he knew what he had to do. He had to be adaptable. He had to change his game, and he credits spending another year with the Wolverines as to why he was able to work out some of those minor issues. So he had a plan in place, and it's really panning out. So once again, his defense has improved. Is it his skill set? No. Obviously, offense is going to be his bread and butter, and we have someone to compare him to, and that's his older brother Quinn with the Vancouver Canucks. People are saying that Luke Hughes is a better version of Quinn Hughes. Now, Quinn is very good defensively. Offensively, he's only going to give you an X amount of goals, not a lot. But Luke can give you more of those goals, and he's able to play somewhat good defense. But in the modern NHL, obviously, a defenseman that is able to generate a lot of points is going to win you a Norris Trophy more times than not, once again, in this modern NHL world. So those are my 3 reasons as to why I think Luke Hughes could potentially win the Calder Trophy. And if you were to put down a $5 wager on FanDuel for him to upset Connor Bedard, you could potentially win $30. So that's my 2-cent opinion. Now, I had the chance to ask Luke, how did he work out some of the issues that he had when he was first drafted? What had happened during his development? He didn't really give me the best response because he lost his train of thought, but here's what he told me.
How has your game matured ever since you got drafted? Because we always knew you were an offensive-minded defenseman, and people were concerned about your defense. But if Game 5 was any indicator, you debunked those rumors. So curious to know how your game has matured.
Yeah, I think just my maturity level has grown a lot. I think really picking your spots, when to go, when not to go, and I'm still learning. I'm still getting better, and I think this summer's huge for me, and I want to get better at all aspects of my game. But I think sorry, I lost my train of thought. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, so some humor to close out the show. I don't know if it was the way I phrased the question, but I tried to provide some detail as to where I was going with the overall framing or overall direction. But I don't know. I thought the question was clear. I guess he just kind of got lost in his tangent a little bit. But anyway, just some humor to close out the show. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think Luke Hughes can possibly win the Calder? Can he dethrone Connor Bedard? And also let me know what you guys think. Do you consider Connor Bedard to be one of the top players in the NHL right now, despite him not playing in a single preseason game up to this point? Let me know what you guys think. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below. If you're listening on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X, now formerly Twitter page at TreyMatt4, and the show's X page at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. So continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.